Welcome to Election Belmont, and I am your host, Kathleen Zhu, and we're here live to cover the local election that's going on today. And I would love to introduce Mike Widmer, who is the town moderator.
Nice to join you, Kathleen.
And I'd also like to introduce Susan Danseyar, who's here from the Belmont Patch.
Nice to join you.
And lastly, Bridget Dooley, who is my fellow student liaison to the school committee.
Thank you for having me. And we're also having comments through the Belmont Media website and through Twitter online.
And also Tony Schinella from the Belmont Citizen-Herald will be Skyping in from Town Hall, and we're going to go to Tony right now. And Tony, what's the atmosphere like at Town Hall?
Well, it's actually been a pretty slow day here all across town. Light turnout and a slow trickle of voters. However, in the last hour or so, we've seen a number of people coming in. There was actually a line outside of the polling location here at the town hall that was 4 people deep, which seems like it was a pretty busy minute there. And it's been pretty slow, and we'll have results coming up in just a few minutes and throughout the night with you guys. So thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So excuse me, Mike.
Yes.
What do you think the hot button issues are for this election?
Well, obviously the town-wide races is what we're looking at in particular. The school committee, we have a contested race, 3 candidates for the 2 positions, 2 incumbents, Ann Rittenberg and Laurie Graham, and then the challenger Kevin Cunningham, who ran a year ago and is now running again. And then the Board of Library Trustees, we have 2 incumbents, Mary Keenan and Hal Shubin, and Matt Sullivan is running against the 2 of them. So those are the key races townwide. We also have races for about 4 of the 8 precincts in terms of town meeting. 1, 2, 3, and 8, I think, have more contestants, if you will, running than positions available. The other 4 have 1 or 2 one-year races. So the main thing we're looking at is school committee and library trustees.
Right. And also Ralph Jones, who's the chair of the Board of Selectmen, is also up for re-election, but he's running uncontested, so I think I know how that one's going to turn out.
Well, it's always nice to run uncontested. I'm running as a town moderator again, and it's a lot better not to have an opponent. I think one of the interesting things in the races, although they've been pretty quiet, is you have from the challengers in each case, Kevin Cunningham for the school committee and Matt Sullivan for the library trustees, individuals who have taken a somewhat different stance from the incumbents.
Right. Exactly.
How visible those efforts are, we'll see in terms of the results. But in the case of Kevin Cunningham, he's been talking about the need for long-term planning and a strategy for the schools. And in the case of Matt Sullivan, he's actually taken a position against the new library, and the 2 incumbents are strongly supportive of a new library. So there are some clear demarcations or differences in the positions of the candidates, though it has been not a particularly visible campaign. So I don't know, and a small turnout, so I don't know how visible those issues are in the electorate, and we'll see in a few minutes with the results.
I think what's interesting is that both Cunningham and Sullivan sort of represent the economic times, because Sullivan is against getting a new library and he really wants to focus on being more financially conservative and just focusing on repairs. And Cunningham, with his focus on long-term planning, that sort of, he mirrors the sentiment that I've been hearing from a lot of people who are against an override. So I think that if Cunningham or Sullivan were to win, they would sort of show that the people in Belmont are still concerned about the economy.
Well, that's clearly an overarching issue for the country, the state, and for Belmont. And yes, we're seeing the beginnings of an economic recovery, but not a lot of new jobs being created. And even though Belmont may be somewhat better off than as a community than from an employment point of view than other communities, a lot of people in Belmont are clearly struggling to make ends meet.
Absolutely.
And I think we're seeing that across the state in terms of races and overrides, real and potential, and the discussions that are taking place about whether we can afford them or not as taxpayers.
I think it's also interesting to know how these new sentiments, if Cunningham and Sullivan are elected, will play with the members that are already involved. Because I know the school committee, they have been talking about long-term planning, so to see how that is kind of wrestled out in the long term will be interesting.
Kathleen, I think that this particular election is not going to change things financially in a huge way. I think the big vote coming before the town is the override.
Right. And that's absolutely something we should talk about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the number one issue facing the town is its budget for the next fiscal year and the difficult finances, and Belmont's with the vast majority of communities and finding that they don't have the revenues to support current level of programs. So the question about state aid and other variables, and then whether we in fact have an override is the number one question. Only the Board of Selectmen can vote an override, and there is going to be no turnover there, so we know the 3 individuals, and so 2 out of 3 would have to support an override.
Right. So I guess this is a good question for both Mike and Susan, but in your work, how do you think Belmont compares to other local communities? Are they hurting financially as much as we are? Are they sort of facing the same override question?
You go ahead.
Oh yeah,
Susan.
it's come up in several towns. I do know that our per pupil spending is lower than surrounding communities, and I don't know what that means if we're more fiscally responsible, the school committee, but several towns have had overrides for this very reason, for their schools.
Yeah, I think a lot of the communities like Belmont are seeing the same tension between the desire not to put any more of a burden on taxpayers than they absolutely have to on the one hand, reflecting in many cases the high taxes already and the tough time. At the same time, a strong desire to preserve the services which are critical. Education, obviously a critical variable, a critical key for Belmont, has been for decades and decades, the quality of our schools. So there's a huge tension, and that's taking place in Winchester and Lexington and Concord and lots of communities similar to ours, and there are no easy answers. So we're right in the midst of that. But,
That's what it.
Oh, and I was thinking it's interesting to note that a lot of the communities that we're kind of compared to, Lexington, Wellesley, Concord, like you're saying, I think they have more of a system where they kind of every 3 or 4 years they pass an override, whereas in Belmont we haven't passed an override for the schools for the last 9 years, so I think we really are in a position where we really do need the override.
And more than that, but Arlington is actually a very interesting example where I think they passed a $6 million override. It was a significant amount of money. And the schools sort of made the promise that you're going to give us this big amount, but we won't come back to you for the next however many number of years.
Right.
And I think that that's something that the school committee members have been keeping in the back of their minds or have been thinking about, because that is long-term planning. And that might be an option that we need to seriously pursue.
Well, then there's also kind of the opposite of that, which is passing smaller overrides over and over again, which I think is something that Wellesley does, and it works well for them. But then also you have to kind of think of the demographic of Wellesley and Concord and towns that academically are compared to Belmont, but then aren't necessarily socioeconomically compatible with businesses and the diversity that Belmont has.
it's always a difficult political decision. Do you go for a smaller override for 1 year or a bigger override which cover a couple of years?
So right now we're actually going to cut to Tony Schinella, who's joining us from Town Hall. Hi, Tony.
Election results in with 2 precincts reporting. In the school committee race, we have Kevin Cunningham with 548 votes, Lori Graham in second with 415, Ann Rittenberg at 307 with 2 precincts reporting. In the Board of Library Trustees race, we have Mary Keenan with 477 votes, Matt Sullivan with 400 votes, and Hal Shubin with 341 votes. I expect another 2 precincts to be texted into me within the next few minutes. So I'll take it back, send it back to you guys, and then give you an update in a couple
Tony, may I ask? Tony, could I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
What are the precincts? Do you know the numbers of the 2 precincts?
Yeah, that's precinct 2 and precinct 3. So
2 and
far.
3.
Yep. Yep. And actually, if we can, why don't we bring Ralph Jones here, who is the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, if you guys give me a couple of minutes here, who just came in. And Ralph won by default here in his race. He was non-challenged this year, so congratulations for running that really great hard race against the blanks, Ralph.
Thank you very much. I think I beat the blanks, at least in precinct 2, my home precinct. Over now.
Everybody over in the studio has been talking about the future of Belmont. What's the post-election things that you'll be looking at? There's a lot of stuff going on. What are kind of maybe 2 or 3 things that you're going to be working on in the next 3 years in your second term as Board of Selectmen?
Well, I think obviously the immediate thing will be settling this year's budget and making sure that all the programs that need to be funded are funded. But looking forward, I think that my colleagues, particularly Mark Palillo, is wanting to do a multi-year budgeting process that I think a lot of people think makes a lot of sense. And I've really appreciated his work on that. In fact, I've appreciated the work of both of my colleagues. We also have an Economic Development Council now, which I think should be helpful to us in terms of encouraging businesses to move into Belmont to increase our commercial tax base a little bit. And so I think those will be the 2 things that will probably be most interesting for us.
And of course, you want to thank all the voters for your votes today, correct?
Absolutely, I do. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
That's Ralph Jones. He has won re-election for the Belmont Board of Selectmen to another term for 3 years. His second term, he's also served on the school committee. Back to you guys in the studio.
So, Ralph, we actually have a question for you, if we could have you back on. And I think everyone's sort of wondering, when is the override going, when are you going to put the override on the ballot if you are going to be doing that?
I was just talking with Ellen about dates, and I know as a minimum we'll have to have it on by April 25th, which would give us an election date of June 6th. But we might very well be able to do it earlier, depending upon how soon we get all the numbers we need.
Okay, so you have to have it on you have to make a decision by the end of April in order to get it on the first week of June.
Yes, and then that's our own internal deadline, is to try to decide by then rather than wait longer.
Do we have any other questions over there?
Well, I would just make an observation that, as Ralph knows, that we're going to get the House budget numbers next week, and that will be a guide as to what the local aid is going to be for Belmont. It's not the final number, yes, but it'll be more definitive than the governor's number, and that'll be part of it.
That's why we have not yet made a decision. We need to know what kind of number we're looking at, and that'll be very helpful.
And what other numbers are you waiting for?
There are a variety of numbers. I would like to see the warrant committee's final tally of all the cuts and adds, which we're still working on. There are also some other possible cost savings that we might find in the town, and I think we're looking at the warrant committee to try to find out what gets restored at various levels of funding for the schools.
You've also had the decision to expand the billing for the fire department is scheduled to bring in more money for FY12. Do you think you'll make a decision on ALS before you make a decision on placing an override ballot on?
I don't know that, but I do know that there are a series of estimated revenue numbers by department, and we just got a report on that last week, and some of those revenues are coming in higher this year than anticipated, which means we might budget them a bit higher for FY12.
For those of you who don't know, ALS is the Advanced Life Support System, and what it allows EMTs to do is a higher level of service than basic life support, but it also brings in higher rates because the billing is higher. And the estimates, I think, were around 1.1 million. Was that what I saw?
Don't remember off the top of my head, sorry.
But it's significantly more than basic life support. Great, Ralph, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Back to you guys in the studio. We'll have more results in just a couple of minutes.
So, Mike, do you think that, so we've just heard back from precincts 2 and 3. Do you think that will change when we hear back from the other precincts?
Well, what I'm struck by is the spread. Let's look at the school committee. As I understood the numbers, Kevin Cunningham at 548, Laurie Graham 415, and Ann Rittenberg 307. So that's quite a spread. I mean, the difference between Ann and Kevin is 240 votes.
And Ann Rittenberg is the current chair of the school committee.
Yes, she is. And so that's a sizable margin for 2 precincts, to say the least. And it seems to me that it suggests that Kevin is in a very strong position. And I think it would be difficult to make up a margin of that deficit in the other precincts. On the other hand, sometimes there are surprises. I think once we have a couple more precincts, if we have half of them and this margin holds, you begin to see that that is definitive. There are differences, of course, among the precincts in terms of the kind of voters and so forth, but precincts 2 and 3 would not necessarily have been the ones that I would have thought would have been Kevin's strongest precincts, and the fact that he's come in at the top of the ticket with that kind of margin suggests to me that he's in a very strong position.
Is one of the precincts, oh sorry, is one his precinct? I think he's precinct 4.
He lives on Chandler Road.
Which is,
right.
I think, in precinct 4.
Is it precinct 4? Okay.
But I'm not sure. The other is the library. Now that looks still pretty close. I mean, some spread. I mean, Mary Keenan at 477 and Matt Sullivan at 400, I believe. Is that right? And Hal Shubin at 341. Was Matt at 400?
Those were the numbers I got.
So those numbers are much tighter than the school committee. And now Matt's doing well there. He's in second place, and he's in precinct 5. So that is not in among the precincts at this point. So that seems to be a very contested race. But I think Mary Keenan's precinct is covered. I think she's in, I'm not sure, I think she's in precinct 3. But in any case, she's got quite a sizable lead, but that's closer than the school committee. So the next 2 precincts will be telling.
You know, obviously we have to wait for 6 more precincts, but the fact that Matt has this many votes is very impressive to me. He's a newcomer. To my knowledge, he hasn't really been involved with the library except as a patron.
He was, he's been a town meeting member
since he was in high school.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
So he's done that.
Right.
But I think those are good results for someone with relatively little experience on boards and commissions.
I think that might mirror a sentiment, like we were saying. These people are kind of indicative of different sentiments in the town, so perhaps that's saying that more people are in favor of being more fiscally conservative with the library. And
right.
Sorry.
I was just going to think that for me it's interesting because I feel like Matt Sullivan has sort of been learning as he goes through the election process, because I was reading one of the old newspaper articles about him, and then I talked to him just a couple of days ago, and it seemed like he had sort of gotten more information. And I think for him, as a first-time library trustee, first time getting involved in the library, he's definitely learning as he goes, and it's very different from comparing him to Keenan or Shubin.
Now, Matt is obviously a protest vote against the new library, and as you and I were discussing before, the trustees have already applied for the grant for a new library, so he couldn't do that much to change the process. Or, I'm sorry, could he?
Well, the grant is only the very first step in the process. And then presumably we will get a grant from it, but then there's a long line with other communities. So when we might get the grant is really uncertain. We might get the grant in much better economic times, and when there's more of a sense of, oh, well, we need a new library. I mean, obviously we have an old library compared to most other communities, but on the other hand, it's another tax burden, so that's again the trade-off. But so the process is really just beginning, and the town meeting even will really just be asked to support the grant request at the upcoming town meeting. And then subsequently, if we get the grant and it's time to go forward, there would be a building committee and then an appropriation for the money, and then go to the ballot and the voters would vote it. So this is just the first chapter of many chapters.
But basically I agree with Bridget that this, so far, just from the 2 precincts, does tell me that there are people who agree with Matt.
Right.
And they don't want,
with Cunningham also.
And Mike, I just have a question for you. Do you know how long could this process possibly take, just to get even the grant money back and then?
We'll know in the next few months,
Okay.
I believe, where we stand in the grant request.
Okay.
I mean, the problem is I think they're giving away only the state in this round, something like $10 million, and I don't know what the total is, but of requests, but it's much more than that. So clearly, it'll take many years to go through the list, and depends where Belmont is.
Right.
They already looked favorably in an earlier grant request, and
That was back in 2005, right?
2005.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Belmont Library got the grant in 2005, and they decided to not take it after they got the grant because, from what I heard from Mary Keenan, they were sort of thinking that now it's Wellington's turn. So we have gotten the grant before.
We did get a grant before, but then basically the decision sort of broadly on the leaders in Belmont was made, well, Wellington is sort of next in line. And then that was passed, that exclusion, and so now Wellington's going to be coming online. The problem is, for Belmont, not only do you need the money for an operating budget, but you've got this long list of capital projects that we need. And so we can't obviously afford to do all of them at once. So the question always is, how are we going to stage them? So we built a senior center, we're redoing Wellington, high school needs some serious work.
I thought
library.
I have an answer
Would
to
you agree?
I would agree, and I think Bridget would agree also.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I know our especially our science labs aren't up to code with the with the certification.
Right.
What is the NEASC certification?
And then our front doors, I know our front doors don't work. And they haven't worked for several years.
And then you can't get out?
There's a couple of them that are broken.
There are some doors that have been broken for years. Since I was a freshman, now I'm a senior.
Bridget, I wanted to tell you something. Actually, there was a meeting on Wednesday. Matt Lowry, who's the chairman of the Library Board of Trustees, was speaking to the Capital Budget Committee and the Board of Selectmen. And he gave dates. The town will have until, we'll find out about the grant round on June 16th, if we get the money. And it's expected to be, I think it was at least 8.3 million.
Yeah, I heard.
Is that right?
That's what
8
we're
million.
requesting, I think. Isn't that what we're requesting, the 8.3?
8.3, so it'll be at least that. And then the town has until January 2012 to accept the grant.
If we were,
If we get it.
that would be the
What was that
quickest.
date again?
But that's right. We have to January. If we're at the top,
2012.
if we're at the top of the list.
Right.
But let's say we're, I don't know, pick a place 6th or 7th in the list. Then it's a much slower process because they only have the 10 million.
Oh, here we go.
And we're actually going to cut to Tony because he has more results for us.
Thanks worth of results, everybody. And right now in the school committee race, Kevin Cunningham and Lori Graham are in the lead. Kevin has 1,078 votes, and Lori has 917 votes. Ann Rittenberg has 650 votes. And in the Library Board of Trustees race, Mary Keenan has 1,013 votes, Matt Sullivan has 817, and Hal Shubin has 738. It should be noted these are unofficial results that I've quickly tabulated from with field reporters, so they're not official results yet, and we still have 4 more precincts to come in. But right now we have Lori Graham, who's one of the incumbent school committee members, with us here at the town hall. Lori, thanks for being with us.
Thanks. It's nice to be here.
Well, it seems like you may cruise to re-election this year. It's going to be a difficult next 3 years in your next term. What are some of your plans?
Well, I think the plans are, the plans at least that the school committee has is obviously tomorrow night when we have our first school committee meeting of the new slate, whoever's there. We will first have an organizational meeting where we'll be choosing who will be the chair of the school committee and who will be the secretary, and possibly some really important committee assignments. The ones that are most important would be the warrant committee, the capital budget committee, and so we'll be discussing that tomorrow. So that's the first thing. Then the next thing that we're going to be doing is sort of continuing with the budget issues that we have for this rest of the school year, for the budget for next year, year, and then also picking the, going through the interim superintendent process.
Now, Lori, it's been speculated that you'll be elected the new chairperson of the school committee, and that you can talk a little bit about it. It's been revolving in 2-year terms, and you're the next person up. Are you going to seek that of your colleagues, assuming you win re-election tonight?
Well, what we've always done in the past is it has been the senior person and who has not yet been chair, and it has been usually a 2-year process, but each year we need to choose who's going to be the chair and who's the secretary for that term. So that vote will happen tomorrow.
You didn't answer the question. Are you going to run?
Well, we don't kind of run that way.
Are you going to decline to be chairperson?
No, I would not.
Okay, thanks. There you go. That's one other question. Now, you've been working very hard on the communications subcommittee. Will you continue that work? And what are some of the goals of that subcommittee that you've been working on?
Well, again, I'm not sure whether I will continue on that. I think we need to see who's sitting at the table tomorrow night and make that decision. But we certainly know that communications have been a challenge for us since long before I got on the school committee. So I think that that's going to be certainly a focus, and we will be communicating both about the budget, about the interim superintendent, and the initiatives that the school committee is going to be doing for the next school year.
Now, Lori, our crew has been throwing questions at me when Ralph Jones was here. Do you guys have any questions for Lori before we let her go and celebrate almost?
Absolutely. So Kevin Cunningham, who looks like he's in the lead as of right now, he's sort of been running with the idea of long-term planning with the budget. How do you feel about that? Where do you stand, and how do you see long-term planning in the future of the school committee?
I think that one of the questions has been about the long-term planning that the school committee is facing, and we certainly know, I mean, it's a legitimate issue that Kevin has brought up and campaigned on, and it's certainly something that no matter who is elected to the school committee, that's something that we know that we need to do, but we also need to be able to do it in concert with the town side and not be doing it in isolation and sort of a vacuum. So it's something that I think that whoever's the school committee, whoever's going to be the Board of Selectmen, and whoever might come on to the warrant committee over this next year will be working to try and tweak the budget process so it's much more accessible to people.
Everyone needs to come together.
Everybody needs to come together.
Any other questions?
Anything?
No. Nope. Well, we're going to switch it back to you. This has been Lori Graham, incumbent member of the school committee, who is in lead in one of the 2 places after 4 precincts from Town Hall. Back to you guys.
Tony, may I interrupt?
Yep, go ahead, Mike.
The other 2 precincts, you said the first 2 were 2 and 3. Do you know the which?
Yeah, we now have 2, 3, 5, and 6. So we don't have. So if we're gonna talk shop before we get the rest of the results, and we probably won't get any for about another 15 minutes as they come in. We don't have Ann Rittenberg's home precinct, which is precinct 6, and we also don't have Kevin Cunningham's. Excuse me, precinct 8. Thank you. And we also don't have Kevin Cunningham's precinct yet, which is precinct 4, which historically tends to be a lower turnout precinct as well. So those could, that's why I said it's a caveat. Nobody's won yet. We only have 4 precincts, so things could definitely shift around as we see votes come in from precinct 1, precinct 1, precinct 4, and precinct 7 and 8.
Tony, we just want to confirm this, but Ann Rittenberg's home precinct is precinct 8.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I keep thinking Farnham's on 6, but it's on 8. I know. Anything else?
Well, actually, I have one last question for Lori. So she talked about communications, and that's another thing that Kevin Cunningham has brought up. Lori, what do you see the school doing in terms of communication?
Well, I think in terms of what the school committee can be doing in communications is the process that we had started last year and also continue this year of trying to have some bi-directional communication, so it isn't just the school committee communicating out to the residents, but it's people being able to have maybe a little bit easier access to the school committee to be expressing their opinion. But one big thing to do is to come to the community dialogue, which is on May 4th, where everybody can express what their concerns are and their vision for the future for the school department.
Lori, let me jump in for a second. It seems as though there's a lot of people who do complain about the communication process. And then when you guys, excuse me, when your board has a meeting where you have all your spreadsheets and you have all your diagrams, there's 20 people there. And I mean, how do you pull people out of their homes and say, you know, look, you want to be educated about things, you want to know about things, we're having this meeting.
Okay, all right, we've lost the Skype feed. Go ahead.
And then nobody's there. I mean, what do you do?
I think one of the things, though, that we do know is because of the media center, that people do stay home and watch this on cable. Unfortunately, they're not able to, you know, we can't really see the residents' reactions to things. We certainly, at most times, we don't take questions right at the meeting. But so it's a two-edged sword. It's great that we've got the media that is there that's covering things, and Paul was there all the time. But we don't. But people don't necessarily come out. People come out for an issue that's important to them, and but nobody really. I think people get frustrated and tired of sitting through a 2-hour budget meeting.
That's Lori Graham. Back to you guys.
Actually, from my experience, and probably Bridget's experience also, 20 people at a school committee meeting is a good turnout.
Oh, yeah.
Mike, I have a question. I once heard that the election is determined by precinct 1 and 8. Clearly, that looks a little...
Well, they're tend to be the largest voter turnout precincts. 6 has, in the last 10 or 15 years, has become a heavy voter turnout as well. I don't know this time because we haven't seen the raw numbers, but 1 and 8, 1 tends to be the largest, highest turnout, 8 second, 6 third. So we have 2 large precincts remaining.
So at this time, we can't say that things won't change?
Well, I think clearly not in terms of the library trustees. I'm looking at the numbers here, and you have a difference between Matt Sullivan and Hal Shubin of about 79 votes. So that's tight, to say the least, and with 4 precincts remaining, one can't certainly call that a race. It does look like Mary is in a pretty commanding position because Mary Keenan, has 200 more votes than Matt does. On the school committee, it does seem that the spread is huge between the 2 who are leading and Ann. So I think I'm not the official caller here, but let's just say based on my years in Belmont, it seems to me that's an awfully commanding lead that the 2 of them have.
Well, maybe Bridget and Kathleen have more. Well, I don't know if you'd want to speak personally. I'm quite surprised by the results. I don't know if you are. I'm extremely fond of all 3 candidates. I would very much miss Ann. It's too bad they couldn't all 3 be on. But we did notice, and it may have been because of lack of time, when Kevin, during candidates night, I don't know if you were there, but also when we interviewed him, he has a lot of ideas for economic sustainability for the schools. And most of the things he mentioned, again, he may not have had time to tell me everything, are things the school committee are already doing. And so this, to me, could possibly be a no confidence vote in one of the other members, but I'm not sure.
Right.
Well, I can definitely, yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think he's kind of playing on the idea of sustainability, and with the budget coming up this year, everyone's talking about sustainability, and I know the entire board, Ralph Jones, everyone is talking about how we can make the process more efficient and more sustainable, and I think he's really just taken that and run with it, and people like hearing change. And
I mean, I think there's no question that as the outsider presenting a different point of view, though it was in broad strokes, not detailed specifics, clearly resonated with the voters. The results suggest that. But at this point, he's topping the ticket too. It isn't just a matter of squeaking in and beating an incumbent. If these numbers hold over the next 4 precincts, it will be a very impressive win for somebody who ran a year ago, and that actually may have helped him given visibility, but finished distant 3rd and now potentially topping the ticket. So that's
I think it was 20% of the vote that he got last year.
I don't recall, I think what's interesting is that maybe to a certain extent, and this is sort of in my opinion, that the voters are sort of punishing the bearer of bad news, because Ann Rittenberg has been the one who's been in charge, and you know, she does have to bring the bad news that, oh, hey, look, our budget's not doing that great. And Kevin Cunningham is sort of coming from a different angle, where he can be like, I knew the budget wasn't going to do well, and I could have done something about it, but I wasn't voted in, and now I can do something about it. So I think that they're running from opposite ends of the spectrum, and they have their own unique challenges.
Well, there's no question that incumbency in difficult times is a liability. I mean, in glorious economic times, whether it's a governor or a president, I mean, that's when they win, generally speaking, win re-elections. When the economy's in recession, presidents, governors, and school committee chairs often bite the dust, so to speak, because it's just, and so I think clearly this has been a very difficult time to be chair of the school committee. And
Yes.
Anne is a tireless worker, but she's been in the spotlight and in a difficult time. And so clearly, I think, as you say, Kathleen, that's one of the issues here.
Right. And I think the other thing, and this reflects upon my experience, and probably Bridget's experience also, is that as student representatives to the school committee, Anne and the other school committee members have been very open to hearing about what's been going on at the high school. And I think it's made it a pleasure for us to work with them. And I definitely have very fond feelings for Anne and Lori. And I'm sure if I were to be student representative next year, I would have fond feelings for Kevin Cunningham.
What's interesting about the schools in Belmont, and it's true in a lot of communities, a lot of especially kind of suburban communities like Belmont, is there's a bit of a schizophrenic attitude in Belmont. Huge pride with Belmont schools, as there should be, and a belief that that's a key part, as it is, of what Belmont is and our quality of life, and obviously our real estate values. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there's always been a strong strand, and this is true in other communities, of resentment toward the schools for spending the amount of money schools spend. So in our case, it's more than, Belmont's case, it's more than 50% of the budget.
Is
Other
it
communities,
57?
it's more, something like that, 57%. In other communities, I mean, some I've seen are 65 and 70%.
Right.
But in any case, in most communities, it's a large share. And so you have that kind of love-hate relationship, if you will. And that plays out in elections over the years, as we're seeing in this election, I think, and particularly at turning points and difficult moments when there's not enough money, for example, as there certainly is not presently.
Can I ask Kathleen and Bridget a question? Do you two use the public library?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
More when I was a kid, but just because school has been crazy busy.
I think one thing that is really important about the library, actually, especially with the upcoming budget cuts, if they do go through, is that it can supply, one of the things they're thinking of cutting from the budget is the library services at the high school. And it's really important to have the same online resources, particularly at the library, which is what mainly I use from that library.
Well, I was going to ask you both, if you do use the library, if you find it insufficient as it is now, if you would like to see the town have a new library.
I think that, personally speaking, I am very, I'm a survivalist. So, unfortunately, I have very low standards for pretty much everything. So, I think that my attitude has, I've grown up with the library, so I'm used to stuff falling apart and the radiator making loud noises. So, I might not be the best person to ask, but Bridget might be.
Okay.
I feel like I kind of have the same,
There's an honest answer.
Yeah, that's true. I have to say that I kind of have the same sentiment. I've grown up with this library. I mean, you can go to Arlington and see the dome, but I mean, to me, this seems what the library is. I mean, it has books, it has computers, but I mean, I know that there are certain challenges that they're facing just as far as handicap, it's not up to code, which is a problem.
It's grandfathered in. And another, changing tracks, so the school, we're actually going to cut to Tony right now because I think he has more results for us.
That's correct. We have 5 precincts in, precinct 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And right now, Kevin Cunningham is leading in the school committee race with 1,288 votes. Lori Graham is second with 1,035 votes, and Ann Rittenberg has 723 votes. There are 10 write-in votes so far. In the Board of Library Trustees race, Mary Keenan has 1,159 votes. Matt Sullivan has 979 votes, and Hal Shubin has 816 votes with 5 write-ins. Right now, joining me in the Town Hall auditorium is Matt Sullivan, the challenger in the Library Trustees race. Of course, these are 5 precincts, so we still have 3 more, and it's a tight race between him and incumbent Hal Shubin. Matt, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
What was the response outside when you were at the polls? I know you spent most of the day at the polls talking to people. The Board of Library Trustees seem to have an air of, do you want a new library? Do you want to repair the library? Do you want to renovate the old library? That seemed to be a talking point in your race. What were you hearing from people at the polls?
I was hearing a lot of positive feedback on my stances and positions that I took during the campaign, and people are not ready for another override, debt exclusion at this time, and just want to fix what we have, the library.
I know that you were knocking on a lot of doors and being campaigning aggressively, and yet you're still in a pretty tight race for third there. Could you have done anything, second, but with the third place person. Could you have done anything differently in hindsight? Do you think that in your race at all, are you thinking about that now, or just going to wait for the next 3 precincts to come?
Yeah, I'll just wait and see.
Just wait and see.
I feel pretty good about the campaign I ran.
Okay.
So
that
Matt,
we have any questions over there for Matt Sullivan?
So Matt, you talked about, fixing what we have, and part of the issue, from what I've heard from Mary Keenan and Hal Shubin, is that if we fix what we have and it costs more than 30% of the assessed value of the building, we have to make it disability accessible. And making it disability accessible is millions on top of that. So with all of the repairs added up, we're just a little farther away from getting a new building. How do you feel about the disability repairs?
I think we have to do the repairs, but I don't think it's going to come to near 30% of the total cost. And I just don't see it. I mean, we don't have to do all the repairs right away either. I mean, right now I'd say fix the roof and the elevator and hold off on other stuff for now.
Any other questions? You've also campaigned on fixing the front stairs, which seems to have been an ongoing issue for a number of years. That isn't necessarily, that's a beam issue, not necessarily a building issue.
Yeah, right now it doesn't even need to be done, I don't think. I mean, a lot of people have said like during the campaign, why don't you like fill in the stairs and put plantings there? That's another possibility. Something to look at.
Back to you guys in the studio. We'll have more results coming up.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. So have you been following the library trustee race closely, Mike?
Well, as I look at the numbers with the additional precinct, now it's precinct 4, I would have expected that this would support Matt more than over Hal, given the trends we've seen, which it did. So he's opened up a lead now over Hal, if I had correctly, about 160 votes, I think 979, 816, right. 163 votes. So he's got a larger lead. 3 precincts to go. It's still a tight race, but Matt's clearly in a stronger position. 816, 979. Yeah. Yeah. So that's those are the numbers we had. I mean, I think it's clear that Mary will top the ticket, and so I think the issue here is between Matt and Hal for the other position.
It's sort of interesting that Mary and Sullivan are sort of coming from different ends of the spectrum, but they've got the seats. So I feel like it's still very different, schizophrenic, as you said before.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the internal, I mean, the images, if you will, or the campaigns of Mary and Hal. I mean, in contact, Matt was clear about where he was running from, but Mary and Hal are both strong supporters of the new library, and so forth. So the difference between them and this election race, roughly 350 votes now, I don't have a particular explanation for that, other than if you've got 2 votes, you know, you can, and you use them both, you can, if you want somebody new, you can vote for Matt and then one of the incumbents.
You know, Kathleen, we follow every race carefully, a newspaper, and the thing I find perplexing is all the trustees want a new library, and why cast a vote for Mary and not Hal?
Right.
You know, it could have been either one. And in my observations, Mary's a tireless worker. She loves the library. She's extremely modest when you ask her a question about herself. And nobody on this board toots their own horn. Obviously, Hal is modest too, but he's more vocal. And so I would just put that out for your thoughts, that maybe that's why he's in 3rd place. He talks more to the public, although at candidates night, definitely Mary said she should be re-elected. She's a tireless worker. Sorry. Right.
Yeah, I don't know what the explanation is of their difference. I mean, you know, Hal may be out front more, but he's not. I mean, he's always moderate. I mean, Hanley, he's not bombastic, I guess is what I'm
Never
trying to
bombastic.
say. So,
Right.
so I don't know what the explanation is.
When the group comes before, for example, the Board of Selectmen, often it's, well, usually it's Matt speaking, but in his place it would be Hal, and Mary is very quiet. So I'm wondering if, obviously the vote for Matt is against building a new library.
Right.
Perhaps people don't know as much about Mary. Again, I would hate to see Hal not serve.
Right. I was talking to Bridget about this before, but I think part of it might just be persona and personality and charisma. And you see that on the national level with presidential elections. You see it apparently on the local level too.
I think that's very true. And I was wondering if either of you could tell me, so I haven't been following the library trustees race as closely as the school committee one. So what, other than deciding whether or not to fill a grant for a new library, what are the responsibilities of the library trustees?
Well, they're obviously trying to, with the limited resources or reduced resources from over the years, try to keep it operating, try to adjust, I mean, things like Sunday hours and so forth, so it's open as much as possible, but those are costs, obviously, staffing costs. And then technology, I mean, the whole issue is what in the future, you know better than I, what's the role of a library? I mean, clearly the traditional role of just books, so forth. So how do you think about the library of the future and adapt to that and so forth?
And I know that's one thing that they've talked about with the new library is that their current library is a traditional library, and a more modern library would include more like technological opportunities, and that they don't have the capacity at the current library to kind of like go into a more technological.
I think that's clear, and the space is a real problem. I mean,
exactly.
As you both said, you grew up there and you get used to it, but, and I as well, and my kids did the same when, you know, going through the school system and using the library. But it is interesting when you look at other towns and see what they, you know, what their
get
libraries
library
have.
envy.
And yeah, the space and the opportunity for, and the opportunity to adjust to introduce a new technology. But as we've said, I mean, there's this tension between expanding and projects, the capital projects, and the tax base in the town. And one of the issues that faces Belmont in terms of the tax base is there's very little commercial. Some other communities have a little smaller base as we do, but not too many. So basically any override, any increase in taxes is on the homeowners.
And that goes right back to Jones talking about the Economic Development Committee that I think Paul Lillo is working on. And I think that really they are making it one of their priorities to bring more businesses to Belmont. So the burden isn't just on the homeowners.
You can do some of that, and every business you bring in, an extra dollar, it's good for the community and it's good for the tax base. But when you look at what's realistic given our size and all, I mean, there are limits. So we're going to be a town of homes for the indefinite future.
Right.
And so in the end,
Absolutely.
the trade-off is going to be between how much do the citizens of Belmont want to spend and how much can we consolidate, save, efficiencies. But in the end, there'll also be the question of, well, what are the level of services that we as a community want? And that'll be the ongoing process around overrides and elections.
Right, so if we're talking about bringing businesses and economic development into Belmont, how does the sale of the Cushing Village lot fit into that? And this is probably a good question for Mike and Susan.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, even before you asked, there are two very large development issues coming before the town, Cushing Village and South Pleasant Street. And I forgot your question, sorry.
Oh, I was just, go ahead. That's pretty much
those are important.
Right.
You were saying, I mean, those are an important part of what we're trying to do in terms of introduce some new development to the community in a sensible way.
The planning board had its second forum on a discussion of what people and businesses want for South Pleasant Street. And what was very interesting to me during the second forum is most of the residents who came, I think there were about 60 people there, spoke about possibly lightening up on zoning so that it would allow more commercial building. They were talking about height in particular. But your question was about Cushing Village?
Right, but you ran with it. That was good.
Okay. We're waiting for the developer to bring a plan.
Susan, I'm just going to interrupt you and say that we actually have Tony Schinella with more election results.
Hey, thanks everybody. And by the way, for everybody who is looking for some of the results of the town meeting races, we'll have those online at wickedlocalbelmont.com when the town clerk sends us the PDF. Right now we do have final results from 8 precincts. In the school committee race, Kevin Cunningham has won and topped the ticket with 2,101 votes. Lori Graham came in second with 1,799 votes. Ann Rittenberg received 1,306 votes with 10 write-in votes. And again, these are unofficial results from the town clerk. In the Board of Library Trustees race, Mary Keenan has won with 2,003 votes. Matt Sullivan came in second with 1,636 votes. And Hal Shubin came in third with 1,457 votes. So we will have 2 new board members coming on both of those boards who will be working with some of the incumbents here. And Mike, before I do have Mary Keenan here, we want to do a quick interview with her. But Mike, interesting if you look at these numbers that many of the people who, it seemed as if the school committee was really driving the results a little bit more than the Board of Library Trustees if you look at the amount of people who didn't vote for any library trustees candidates. It looks from a quick count of mine to be in the neighborhood of a few hundred difference there, which would seem, and as well, I should say, the total count of votes was 19.88%, which is pretty high for a local election, but pretty paltry in general. That turns out to about 3,300 votes. So it seems as if a good 5 to 10% of those votes were actually motivated to just vote in the school committee race.
All right, do we have any questions?
Was Tony asking?
That's to you, just to say, did you, that kind of seems a little unusual to have have 2 competitive races and then have a bunch of people blank, the second competitive race.
Well, I think the issue, of course, is that the schools are at the center of the budget and the budget process, and more than half, as we've talked about, more than half of the budget. And so I think clearly the public focus is on the school committee race. I mean, historically, the Board of Selectmen and the school committee have drawn the most attention when there are contested races. So I think that's not surprising, and the library trustees is not as visible, of course, though we're seeing some of the same patterns in terms of the results.
And for those of our team that are at the Belmont Media Center studios, we do have the top library candidate who received the most votes tonight, Mary Keenan. Congratulations on your win.
Thank you.
Are you excited to be serving another term?
Yes, I am. I'm looking forward to another 3 years of work for the library, for the town of Belmont, for the citizens.
What are some of the things you're going to be working on in the next 3 years?
Well, there's a new committee, a facilities consolidation committee that I represent the trustees with, working with the Board of Selectmen and others consolidating facilities in the town to try and save money. I think we have to get Sunday hours back to 30 weeks a year. I think we have to make a clear case so the citizens will know if they want a new library or if they'd rather stay and renovate. I think we have a lot of work to do with budget and policies and just keeping up to date with the 21st century.
I want to say that one of the things that, one of the reasons we endorsed you in the race was you did bring a folder to your debate with a list, an unbelievable list of all of the things that you've been tracking that have been done to the library. And I just do want to say publicly that I was extremely impressed with that, and it really made the difference when we were looking at all of the candidates. So anybody who watched that knew that some people were keeping track of things that were being done in the library to make it better and more useful.
Thank you. After teaching school for 4 decades, I always tried to be prepared. Thank you very much, Tony.
Do you have any questions or comments over there, or we'll swing it back to you?
Well, first off, congratulations, Mary.
Congratulations, Mary.
Do we have any questions?
I actually had a question. Just you were talking about the 21st century roles of the library, and do you think you could talk about that in the context of maybe the renovation versus the building of a new library?
The 21st century role of the library will be greatly impacted by technology, which is bringing about a whole new way of education. And I think it's too soon to talk about new library versus renovation with that until we've done a lot more study. But I'd just like to thank everyone who cast their ballot for me. It's much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Anything else, guys?
Mary, how do you see the library, the Board of Trustees moving forward, especially because Matt Sullivan is new to the board and he sort of has some differing ideas on what's going to happen with the library?
I think having Matt Sullivan as a member of the Board of Trustees will bring a different background and a different point of view, and one which we very much need to hear.
I want it noted that the 2 high school students who are on this program are the ones who are throwing the hard balls and not the softballs by me tonight. And I feel as if I should have come a little bit more prepared, because they're really throwing, they're really throwing hard questions at people tonight. So.
Well,
that's what they teach us in school.
I interviewed with Kathleen on Friday, and I found her a most charming young woman with a bright future ahead of her. So thanks, Kathleen.
Thanks, Mary. Are you sure you have the right Kathleen?
ZHI?
ZHU.
Running up against the clock here at 9 o'clock, and I just do want to say that it's been great working with the Belmont Media Center as always, and I appreciate listening to some of the comments by the panel tonight, and as well, and I'm glad that you could all play a role in this. It was a lot of fun, so thanks for having me, and thanks for doing it, and it's I hope to see you all at another time, and thanks a lot for allowing me to participate, guys.
Absolutely. It was great having you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night. Wow, so the results are in.
Did
Any
Tony
surprises?
tell us? Yes. Did Tony tell us just under 20%
Yeah,
of registered voters?
19.88.
Because it was expected to be much lower.
Oh, really?
I think Ellen, the town clerk, said she was expecting maybe 8 to 10%.
Wow.
Okay.
Really? I mean, that's
That's
awfully low. I don't remember
right, I must have
what
gotten it
Ellen
wrong.
predicted,
But this is about, oh no, last year I think it was just under 30% for town election. I'm sorry, surprises. Yes, my surprise is the school committee race. Mike?
Well, I mean, Kevin ran, I think, the most visible of the campaign and had a point of view. So I'm not surprised that he won, but I think it's really quite a statement that he topped the ticket.
It's the numbers. Right. It's the numbers.
Did it decisively, 300 votes approximately over Laurie, the second place finisher, and much more over Ann. So I think that's the most telling of all the numbers and races tonight, and some of that's reflected in Matt Sullivan's win, second place finish in the library trustees.
Yes, yeah. So we actually do have to wrap up, but it was great having everybody here and to see the election results come in. And I think it's been fantastic. And I'm guessing you're town moderator for another term.
I guess
Right,
so.
congratulations.
I didn't have any
Yeah. Well, we look forward to seeing you.
Great. Thank you, Kathleen. Nice job.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Bridget.
It was
Susan.
great having everybody here.